Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We welcome to this week's show the Democratic Majority Leader of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, Matt Bradford. Matt was recently reelected to his 8th term, representing the 70th Legislative District since 2009, which is situated entirely in Montgomery County, which sits just outside of Philadelphia. Prior to his ascension as Majority Leader, he had served as the Minority Chairman of the powerful House Appropriations Committee. Matt was born and raised in nearby Chester County, his mother serving in the United States Naval Reserve. After completing high school at Downingtown High School, Matt went on to earn his undergraduate degree from Villanova University, and then went on to the Villanova University School of Law, where he earned his Juris Doctorate and became a lawyer. During law school, Matt had a distinguished internship itinerary, having worked for the United Steelworkers Union's General Counsel's Office. He also interned for the United States Attorney's Office in the Justice Department, and then also interned for the United States District Court judges from the Eastern District, which is the district that covers Philadelphia. After some time in private practice, Matt was appointed by Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell to serve as a municipal administrator and CEO of Norristown Borough, a borough that had been financially distressed. Matt is largely credited with leading the borough out of bankruptcy. On today's show, we look forward to discussing how the Democrats managed to maintain their majority, a one-vote majority, over what seemed like a red tidal wave washing everything blue away. We also are going to discuss with Matt where he thinks he will have bipartisan support from the Senate and what bills will have a chance to make it to Governor Shapiro's desk.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Mr. Leader, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we had an engaging chat before we started running the tape, and you're my first Democrat since I came back from summer vacation. So my normal guest, we haven't, because of so much attention on the national election, Joanna McClinton has been a regular guest, and Austin Davis, and my good friend right here in Scranton area, Senator Marty Flynn, a former colleague of yours in the House. So you've saved me because I haven't had, and I've been hearing about when are we going to get to see some Democrats. So thank you for making time, Matt.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad that I'm one of the Democrats that survived the red wave this year. So I'm glad to be here, and thank you for following such great folks. We miss Marty and some of our great friends up in Northeast PA, but Marty's looking for greener pastures over in the Senate these days.
Yeah, yes, he is. And he's done and continues to do great work for our area. Personal friend. But let me start with the elephant in the room. No pun intended about the Republican elephant, but the Republican in the room is amazing what you did. So I like to have guests that have somehow distinguished themselves. Now, you're a former House Appropriations Chairman in the minority at that time. Now you're the majority leader of the Democratic Party in the House. So that's sufficient in and of itself. But you would be the person I would say deserves a lion's share of credit and a raise the roof salute, so to speak. How did you, going into this election, with the slimmest possible majority, which is one seat out of 203 members of the State House, you have a 102 to 101 slimmest majority. The Speaker and I have had that conversation in past discussions, by the way, and you see a red wave, the likes of which I haven't seen in 2 generations, not one. The largest presidential win by a Republican candidate since Ronald Reagan in 1984, the most votes, plurality. As I indicated to you, something I didn't know, this is the first time the Republicans swept all 3 statewide offices other than governor, which means Attorney General Dave Sunday, Auditor General Tim DeFore, State Treasurer Stacey Garrity. Two of those, DeFore and Garrity, were already incumbents, but swept all three for the first time. The delegation to the United States Congress gets flipped. In fact, Matt, as you may be aware, right here in my media market in our district, we have Ryan McKenzie flips out Susan Wild, and Rob Bresnahan flips out House Appropriations Chairman, no less, Matt Cartwright. So, and then, of course, a long-term Democratic legend and legendary family, three-term United States Congressman Bob Casey Jr. loses to Dave McCormick. And with all that having been said, the little engine that could, the Pennsylvania Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, maintains their one-seat majority. So with all that background, you take as much time, Houdini might be the right reference, a miracle of sorts, but you deserve a lot of credit for having done that. How did you do it?
Well, you're kind to say, and I appreciate it, but I would say initially it's a team sport. And the House majority, it was a one-seat majority going into the election. It was a one-seat majority that came through the red wave. I would say it's a compliment to the way we governed, and it's a compliment to the way each one of those 102 House Democrats campaigned in their district. Listen, we're a family. We're a diverse family. The Democratic Party at its best is 102 people who all are, squarely focused on kitchen table, bread and butter issues. But how that plays out in every corner of this Commonwealth is very different. And we gave our members, as we should, as our members demand, the ability to communicate, to speak, and to govern in a way that speaks to every corner of this Commonwealth. So I think we governed well. We campaigned well. We campaigned with an eye to the blue-collar, working-class folks of Northeastern PA, but also a way that also spoke to people who felt like, sometimes the Democratic Party's lost its way. I think House Democratic members went to their district, spoke to those folks, and much like Governor Shapiro has really made a national brand about saying get stuff done, I think our members have a real a track record of how they govern, of real deliverables for real people in their district.
What did you tell the people of Pennsylvania that worked? Because they literally kind of had to split their ticket. People that were helping elect your members, some of them voted it the other way at other offices. So, I know it's a hard question, but take your best shot at it.
Well, again, you're kind to say, but I really do give the compliment directly to those members because, it is 102 different races. We hope to give them the resources and the ability to communicate and to campaign effectively in their district. But what it really comes down to is having candidates that work their district. Jimmy Haddock up your way, that could have been a close race. Jimmy knocked on the door. He spoke to the people of Northeastern PA, told the people as a businessman, as a banker, as a legislator, what he saw as the challenges and what he was delivering for Northeastern PA. And I think that's kind of what you need to do. It can't be about these overarching messages that come down from whether it's DC or Harrisburg. You need strong individuals who represent their community well. And again, I think we have an example of that where we have a governor in Pennsylvania who can go into every corner of this Commonwealth and get votes and can speak to folks, whether you're in Luzerne County or Montgomery County, Lackawanna County or Philadelphia County, or out west, and say, we're not going to leave any voter behind, any opinion behind. People feel already disenfranchised from the political process. We need candidates and campaigns that speak to every voter in every community in every corner of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, one of the theories I had, speaking of Governor Shapiro, Josh, is that, one of the hand-wringing acknowledgments by the national Democrats and the national media about the loss was, they should have picked Josh Shapiro to run as vice president. It would have been a tough sell for him to be the vice president because he was a better candidate, I believe, than the presidential candidate. His messaging, what he's done in Pennsylvania, we may not have this conversation that we're having and talking about red waves. So having said that, he's in prime position. But as you and I also talked off camera, because of his messaging, and you've acknowledged your messaging in the House, it's going to be important for him to get things done. It's going to be important for you to say we got things done, because in 2 years, you're going to be fighting to save that one seat. Again, it goes by pretty quickly. So what do you think is there in a bipartisan way? Joe Pittman has been on this show a half a dozen times as well, good friend of mine, and all that. So I've talked to him. Seth Grove has been on this show, a Republican colleague of yours on appropriations. So how do you work with those folks to get, what would be your wish list, Matt, to get things to the governor to sign that you can get Republican Senate support on?
So I think we got to build on some of the successes we had last year. And listen, there was frustration. Divided government's not easy, but I think we can build on some of these successes in terms of cutting costs, in terms of putting dollars back into consumers' pockets. One of the things, Governor Shapiro rightfully talked about is property tax rent rebate program that's been around 3 decades, one of the largest expansions, not just in terms of the dollars going back to the individual property taxpayer, but as well as the income limits, expanding the number of folks who apply. That's the type of thing we need to do. Also, being pragmatic Democrats, though, being pro-business, that's not a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a damn good thing. I think Democrats need to talk about, we're the ones who talk about we need to cut the corporate net income tax rate in Pennsylvania. We uncapped NOL, or at least raised it to the federal level. I think that's real progress. That is not traditional Democrat or Republican orthodoxy. I like to say the best ideology is competence. I often give that compliment to the governor. We need a competent government. And we need in the next 2 years to build on what we did last year, whether that was the historic increases in terms of school districts like Wilkes-Barre, in terms of the funding levels that we got coming out of the Commonwealth Court case, that not only will demand those schools get better results for those kids, but at the same time, take some of the pressure off the property taxpayers that have been so highly burdened by our failed public school funding system. I think we have a real track record over the last 2 years. But I think there is some building blocks that we need to build on and do even more. And I think with Governor Shapiro at the helm, we have an opportunity to do that.
Well, ironically, I'm very intrigued by what you're talking about, pro-working families, pro-middle class, pro business, small business especially, because as you're aware, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, there was massive leakage, which led to this huge Republican wave of working families, traditional Democratic constituencies, Black working families, Latino working families left the Democratic Party and voted Republican. You resisted that in Pennsylvania. Again, to your credit, congratulations. But everywhere else, and at the top of the ticket, it was clearly something, there are those who have said the Democratic Party has lost its way to a degree. How do you get those people back? I know you're actually talking about it very well, and congratulations. You're dead on. You're laser locked on the issue. Are there any bills or anything we can expect to see coming up that will allow you to tell people why you need to come back to the Democratic Party? Because some have left it. A core constituencies of yours has left it, at least for this cycle.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think you hit the nail on the head too. It's not just working class white folks. It was Black folks, Latino folks, working class folks. It's not enough to just check the box. It's not enough just to show up. Though Governor Shapiro, I think, is right to say you need to show up in all 67 counties. You need to talk to everyone in those counties and hear their concerns. So I think there's that. I talk about the building blocks of what we did last year and how we need to go forward. I think a lot of this comes down to listen, we've fought ourselves to an impasse on issues like the minimum wage for too long. But the reality is most of the people that are struggling, they make more than minimum wage, guys. They're sitting there hearing us having this partisan food fight every year, every 2 years about minimum wage. And they're like, okay, I make 3 times minimum wage at $20 an hour. I can't afford to provide for my family. We need to talk about that angst that exists among those working class folks. Now, I would also recognize Democrats at the same time are also picking up, there's a realignment. Listen, the suburban collar counties, some of them quite affluent in the Pittsburgh inner suburbs as well as of Philadelphia, that are moving more Democratic. But as a true Democrat who goes back to, talking about your past in Democratic Party politics, I don't want to lose our way. I don't want us to lose those voters, whether they pick a lunch pail to work, whether they're a member of a union. Those people are why we're Democrats. Those are the reasons why we fight these fights. We need to talk to them. We need to go to those communities. We need candidates that are of those communities, from those communities, and can talk to those citizens and those voters in a real way.
That's look, you're my first time guest. You're going to say, geez, who told me to go on the Volpe Report? Because I'm hitting you with some pretty substantive questions, but you are the majority leader. And I know everything I've asked you, you have contemplated and you're dealing with, obviously, and will continue to deal with. Matt, we're going to take a quick break for a commercial announcement and show announcements. So take a breath, maybe get a drink. I'm going to slurp some coffee, and we'll be right back.
Now there's more places you can see the Volpe Report. Watch every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. on Fox 56. Or watch on YouTube at the Volpe Report. More ways to watch. Still the same premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. And don't miss a special Christmas episode of the Volpe Report, Sunday, December 8th at 10:30 on Fox 56.
Well, Matt, at the risk, as you and I talked off camera, I always like to do this, especially with a first-time guest. And with you made reference to nerd, or a policy wonk is another term that maybe you're referring to. Thankfully, I've had those on my show. I mentioned Seth Grove, pretty good policy wonk on appropriations issue, as you know. Of course, you must have worked with him. You were on appropriations. Well, let's start out with the state earned income tax credit that you've talked about, as a way to effectively lower taxes or get tax money back to taxpayers. Talk to a little bit, because that's going to go over a lot of people's heads. What is that specifically?
Yeah, so at the federal level, Ronald Reagan, Jack Kemp, classic conservative politicians of their era, supported a federal level earned income tax credit. We have that at the federal level. What some states have done is created a parallel state level earned income tax credit that literally says this is a refundable tax credit, which means dollars directly back to working folks. This is not a welfare program. This is truly about making work pay for these folks. People who go to work every day. We were talking before about folks who make $20 an hour and still can't make ends meet. This is a tax credit that goes specifically back to people that are working hard, playing by the rules, doing everything we'd want them to do, trying to provide for their family. This credit literally targets that community and says not only does it reduce your tax burden, it potentially will return dollars directly to help you pay for whether it's childcare or parochial school, whatever those choices are. It sends those dollars right back to those families, right back to that taxpayer. But again, it's not a welfare program. It truly says only people that work are even going to have taxable credit that can be sent back.
It would seem to me, and I'm a conservative, as I've said, that everything you said there, I find no objection to as a conservative. I mean, because you're talking about not welfare, but you're not talking about it as just a messaging or spin issue. You're talking about it in real terms that, no, we want people who have jobs and are working to get that credit, to enhance that. I'm just going to say, it would be hard for me to believe, as a Republican conservative myself, I would fully support that notion. When you're throwing names around like Jack Kemp and Ronald Reagan, you're going to get a lot of, I would think, Republican people saying, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So do we have a chance of seeing it?
Well, I'll go one step further. You mentioned Ronald Reagan. I believe at the time of the federal tax credit being created, he called it the greatest anti-poverty pro-work program of all time. That's how much of a supporter he was at the federal level. I think it's something we could absolutely do at the state level. I think we need to check the political, blue side, red side at the door and get things like that accomplished. Do I think it's possible? Yes. You mentioned you're good friends with the new incoming Republican House leader. I look forward to working with him. I know him to be a thoughtful person on policy issues like this. I think there's a real opportunity, again, to turn the Rubik's Cube, not to keep having the same stale political fights that have been dogged so many of these conversations for decades, but really show real progress. To use the governor's term, to get stuff done, move the ball forward, not just continue to knock our heads together. That doesn't do the people's business.
Right, no doubt. Well, let's in turn now, let's talk about an issue that I've talked about with every General Assembly guest, Democrats and Republicans. It was kind of a hot button issue, a controversial issue, because Josh Shapiro had campaigned as being favorable to school choice or funding for school choice. It didn't really, it didn't make it out of the shallows, though. The House Democrats said no way, and then it was taken off the table, which caused kind of a brouhaha. Kim Ward, another friend at President Pro Tem, I don't know if she was at that then, she might have been majority leader, basically adjourned the Senate over it for a while. And so, at any rate, getting back to the issue, public education funding is a major issue for you. It's a major issue for Democrats. Marty Flynn, because he's in Scranton, he sits in the chair next to me when he's on. It was a major issue for him, is still in the Senate. Scranton School District was underfunded to the tune, Matt, of $18 million, on the verge of being put into bankruptcy. So, you know, and of course, the Commonwealth Court came out and said the funding system in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional. We're still grappling with that, I think, right? You guys in the General Assembly, there's been no solution. So in a generic way, put your college professor hat on now. You've got your Juris Doctorate, you're a lawyer. So we lawyers, I'm one myself. I pontificated to enough juries. I was not an appellate lawyer, I was a trial lawyer, but do your best to kind of break down the issue from people dealing with the more democratic side of funding for public education, which the teachers' unions very strongly support, versus a governor who is open to the idea of school choice, and whether through a credit, whether through deductions or other ways to fund it. So take it from there.
Well, I start with a simple proposition that every child in Pennsylvania should have available the best education humanly possible, period, full stop. Now, I believe every child has a constitutional, in fact, I believe it's an objective fact. Our state constitution guarantees every child a quality public education. Now, I would also recognize that we have failed to live up to that in some specific cases. We have school districts that have not provided those children that. Now, we have a very robust school choice program already in the Commonwealth, an educational improvement tax credit program, where we use tax credit to help specific families in those challenged circumstances. And House Democrats have said we are a pragmatic fund, and we're willing to have conversations about those type of programs. But what we will never support is a voucher program, where we take public dollars out of public schools, drive up public property taxes to support a private school that doesn't have to take every child in this Commonwealth. If we're going to have a great public school system, and for many decades we've had, frankly, for many centuries we've had in this country, we're going to have to make sure that those public schools are great. Where there are challenges, we can have conversations, but what we can never do is defund public education at the expense of an outside for-profit in some cases, or any type of private schools that exist at the expense of our public schools.
Very well said. And I know it's a complicated issue. So let's talk another thing. Now, the Commonwealth Court has obviously issued their ruling. Some of the conversations I've had with the Speaker and with Governor Davis, and also with Seth Grove, who comes in from the Republican House for me to kind of talk to about the House position, Republican House. Same thing with Joe Pittman as the Senate Majority Leader, like your counterpart in the Senate. And some of the issues are right now, we still have that looming decision. It hasn't been resolved. The Commonwealth Court said it's unconstitutional. I have heard figures, Matt, that range between $5 billion and $7 billion is the amount of the underfunding gap. I don't know if you've heard similar numbers. How do we get there without killing the taxpayers, in other words?
Well, so I think we actually did take a major first step last year.
Right.
We put a $500 million specifically targeted to the Scrantons and the Wilkes-Barres and the most underfunded school district. Not just targeting the schools, but also the taxpayers that have been overburdened by this unconstitutional school funding system. So I will also say that while the Commonwealth Court has ruled, no one took an appeal of the Commonwealth Court ruling. So at this point, the Commonwealth Court ruling has not been appealed to the Supreme Court and becomes the de facto law of the land. So now the obligation, and frankly, it was a Republican elected Commonwealth Court judge who said that the way we are not funding these schools and not supporting these students is unconstitutional. So last year, a $500 million specifically targeted to those most underfunded, overtaxed school districts was rolled in. Now, to your point about what's going to be the total cost, what the advocates and the attorneys who handled the litigation would tell you, that we're going to have to do this for about 8 more years, 8 more budget cycles to continue to incrementally chip away. We cannot do it overnight. That is true. But we also cannot knowingly, unconstitutionally deprive a child of the education opportunity they deserve because we're continuing to work out of this system. So we made historic improvements last year in the funding system. We have about 7, 8, maybe 9 more years of work to do. We recognize that there are financial challenges that this is going to involve, but we should not steal from Peter to pay Paul. We should invest specifically in those schools and in those students that have been deprived of their constitutional right of a quality public education.
Great answer, again, not surprisingly. Let's talk about an issue also. You live outside of Philadelphia, but close enough. Crime has been a big issue, obviously, in Philly, but around the country. We have an understaffing issue in Pennsylvania, I'm told, by like Lieutenant Governor Davis has talked about it. The governor has talked about it. He has an incentive program to hire like 200 police officers more. The state police ranks need to be pushed up. So, like, talk a little bit about that. Where are you now? Because that would be something I think the governor would really like to be able to sign. And crime was an issue the Democrats took a beating on as people viewed it. So what do you think your position will be, speaking for the Democrats in the House, to push that ball down the field?
Yeah, Governor Shapiro doesn't take a backseat to anyone in terms of law and order issues. He's a former attorney general. House Democrats have largely followed his lead. We can be smart on crime. We can make sure we do real criminal justice reform. But at the same time, if people don't feel safe and secure in their neighborhoods, in their schools, in their homes, people aren't going to be able to live the kind of lives that every Pennsylvanian deserves. That's why we've made historic investments in the state police cadet program, huge classes that we've put through the state police program. But we also have more to do because we have many communities that don't rely on state police that are continuing to have shortages. Communities are obviously doing through more incentives, higher pay, incentives, and frankly, respecting the men and women of law enforcement to realize that the job they have is not easy and that we need to give them not just the compensation, but the respect they deserve. And recognizing that while it's a difficult job, it's a job that we so respect the work and the job that they have that we want to compensate them accordingly. But we know we got to hold them to the highest standards in order to have trust and support of the community for those officers to do the difficult work they have to do.
Well, Matt, our time grows to an end. I want to say that I asked you a bunch of tough questions. They were excellent answers. I find myself, as a conservative Republican, agreeing with you on a lot of the issues, the way you've presented them. I would suggest that maybe if you had lended your expertise to the National Democratic Party in Washington, they may have fared better on November 5th in terms of how they handle some of their messaging, which wasn't done too well from my standpoint. But I want to thank you. I want to wish you and your family a wonderful Thanksgiving. And I hope you'll come back on the show and know that whenever you want to speak to people, we cover all of Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. My time slot is a good one. I'm the lead on Fox into Fox NFL Sunday. I'm on at 10:30 on Sunday. I tip it over to Terry Bradshaw and Howie Long and the guys at 11. So it's a good time slot. So if you want to come back and speak to the people of Northeast and Central Pennsylvania, you have an open invitation.
Well, I will take you up on that. Thank you for the kind Thanksgiving greetings, and I would carry it forward to all your listeners. And I'm also glad that you go right before Hall of Famer Howie Long, who's a fellow Villanova alumnus. So you're in good company.
And I'm a Raider fan to boot, so a big Howie Long fan. Again, Matt, and because of your leadership position, I speak for all of Pennsylvania. Godspeed in your work for our Commonwealth and moving this state forward. Thank you for your service. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.